Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Ruskin Art Club. It's our privilege today to hear from, bless you, two of really the finest, if not the two finest poets in the entire Red Hand catalog. These are really as good as any poets writing in America today, Curt Brown and Eloise Klein Healy. I'm really delighted to be introducing the pair of them, beginning with Mr. Brown, who has books of poetry from a variety of presses and is not a figure whom I think of as assembling a personal myth and marketing it as a branded flavor of charisma, but instead a worker in the craft who puts out book after solid book that is made out of bricks. And you can huff and puff, but the things don't blow down because the guy actually knows what he's doing. I'll share with you a brief poem which is topical and is by no means an indication of the scope of this poet's work, but which strikes me as exemplary of the passion and cool-headed precision of his poetic practice. Hunger, Curt Brown. It was late, near the end of the world. Our parents told us, eat everything on your plate. Kids in Europe are starving. Their parents, of course, said the same. Kids in China are starving, and their parents the same. African children starve daily. So, hunger circled the globe like Magellan, looking for a new world of scurvy and rickets, skeletons and hollow skulls. We turned to fast food and pesticides, hormones and hybrids, anything to fill the world with plenty. We scraped our plates like tanners scrape empty skins. And guilt is a bum, half asleep, half dead on the pavement just around the corner from the fine restaurant in which we dine. Ladies and gentlemen, Curt Brown.
Thanks. That's a very nice introduction. I appreciate that. It's always... I've had a few readings here in the past week, and it's always nice to hear somebody read your poems. Don't get a chance to hear that a lot. I'm going to read from this new book, No Other Paradise, which are mostly poems about New York. But I'm not going to read those poems about New York. It's too beautiful out here right now to do that. But I'm trying to do something different in this book, formally and thematically, maybe having a poem that has more than one theme, more than one subject, 2 or 3 subjects sometimes, and trying to weave them together. So for instance, in a poem called Nocturne, I'm talking about seeing the eyes of deer at night. When we were kids, our parents would drive us down in this small town in Connecticut, and we were always excited because we could see their eyes shining in the dark as we came around a corner. And at the same time I was writing this poem, those spaceships were landing on Mars, the Mars orbiters and landers. Nocturne. Those summer evenings I drove the valley road, my brain a network dense with stars. We can only look back, and then in reflections, constellations of photons condensed as ink. I mean neural connections, 10 to the 32nd power. More than the stars of heaven. Yet we are in love with death fleshed out as iron. In our living rooms, a shovel scrapes igneous rock from the other side of Mars. I remember the eyes of deer alive in that blackness when the beam of my headlights struck them. I won't bore you with the light of dead sun, or the plots of dreams that pose some distant longing, then proceed by thwarting it. I searched for them at every bend, wherever my movements probed the dusk, while above me the galaxy drifted wildly apart, like powder burns of the beginning. They appeared out of the darkness as though it bred them. And they were running, though not necessarily towards the light, nor away from it. When they beam up another set of instructions, the circuitry inside iron trips and shimmers like a brain. When I look back, I remember how the night itself seemed breathing, fleshed out. I drove with my eyes open, hurtling into the dark, longing for any light that might appear. That fact in that poem about neural connections in your brain, something I read maybe I don't know, 25 years ago, and it never left me. So eventually I got into this poem. It took 25 years, but I got in there, which says something about my neural connections. But in any human brain, in your brains, any single human brain, the neural connections are 10 to the 32nd power. 10 to the 32nd power. That means there are more neural connections in a single human brain than there are stars in the entire universe, which is pretty mind-boggling if you think about it. So that when people try to impress me about computers, I just laugh. Not that I don't love computers, I do, but the human brain is something else. There's a poem called Mortal Message. I don't wish to talk about the weather, but have you noticed how it's everywhere at all times? We think some mortal message will make us whole. Just now, for instance, raindrops strike my window, so that each drop shatters beautifully, leaving a trail of lesser drops, as though each drop were composed of smaller drops, and inside them, smaller drops, and inside them, etc., until only the idea of a drop is left, from which all drops proceed. Now the rain has stopped, and the droplets on my window shrink as though the smaller something is, the quicker it can vanish, then collect itself in greater parts to reappear again and not be lost. Facing death, we think, I'll change my life. As if the life we lived were not our life, and only death could make us recollect the person we had meant to be. And what of those who've known us? Aren't we dispersed among their memories, each family member or acquaintance carrying a fragment of the person we were, until they gather at our funeral to amass again a single multifarious portrait? And when they drift away once more, each to his own life, are we finally dissipated, finally gone? Words are the tiniest bits of an idea that might cohere into a thought. And thoughts are nothing the wind can't scatter, until they are everywhere, at all times. Though if remembered, if lucid and coherent, beautiful. I suppose I'm wishing in that poem that, yes, though we may all vanish, maybe our words will stay behind. That's the wish as a poet, certainly. Two poems that are, I don't know if they're political poems, but they're socio-politically aware at any rate. When I have lunch every day, I always tune into the news, just catch a little news at midday. Always peps me up to see the news. So anyway, and then I go back and write some more. It's called Living with the News. I'm imagining here, I guess, that, yeah, it's a poem about guilt, and it's a poem about thinking that the person, and you can look into a television set and see somebody and see their suffering, but maybe they can also look out and see you living with the news. These pictures, what do they tell? The day is a widow, the morning an open grave. It's not my hand that strikes them down. While I eat, their heads grow thinner. While I sleep, they murder in their dreams. They swim before me like fish in a bowl. Is the body really this translucent? A disconsolate woman clings to her child, small and shrunken as a fly. When I've had my fill, I rise from the table. She follows me from room to room with open eyes. And another one called Prime Time, again, watching television. Almost everyone here knows that Cerberus is the three-headed dog that guards the gates of hell. Prime time. When the face of the ex-general fills my screen, when he opens his mouth to speak, I think I hear Cerberus barking in hell. But in the daytime, it stares at me like an amnesiac, as though nothing had happened. I'm not fooled. With the flick of a switch, I might view the games in ancient Rome, bring back the emperor rabid for blood. My father hides under a cabbage, while my mother signals from a passing bird. They want to save me, but it's too late. There are 10,000 channels, each of them linked by satellite to Plato's cave. The television ponders its inner self, strapped to the wall like a prisoner to his chair. When I slap it around, it knows nothing. When I shut it down, its whole glare shrinks to a tiny campfire in the enormous dark. And a poem called Baloney. I just want to write a poem about baloney. It's a poem about artificiality, really, about man-made things versus real things, and so forth. Am I doing okay? Baloney. So much has changed, leaving its residue behind. Did I ever really think that things would work out in the end? It isn't real meat, but a compound of meats, a number of animals pressed together like particle board. We say it when we want to debunk something, when we want to imply that it's not real, but false. There is no beast walking the earth whose flesh is baloney. Thank you. So when did it all begin? This fact of the artificial. And was there a real world prior to this one in which baloney had no place and cannot be said to have existed? Or have I only arrived at Plato's realm of shadows by a circuitous route that includes, this time, baloney? And is there an abstract baloney, an ideal baloney, to which our compromised baloney refers? Let us agree baloney is an illusion, and yet it's real. We can't have it both ways, can we? It is our own hand in the world that confounds things, though we ourselves are not an illusion. Things do work out, though not in the way we planned. And illusion is a shore towards which we drift, abandoning the real. Our little boats made of aluminum and plastic, breasting the dark, uncompromising waves. Thank you for that laugh. I appreciate it. The earth whose flesh is baloney. I've never come across one. A poem called Counting the Faces. No, first I'll read Slow Reader, another kind of silly poem. I am a slow reader. I don't know about, my fear is after I die, I go up there and I get there and they say, well, you read a lot, but you never read Tristram Shandy. Go back to the library and, So I'm very slow reader. Whoa, hold it. Everybody stop. I'm stuck in the Middle Ages, founded on Dante and Everyman. Aquinas beckons, the Green Knight shouts avant there, while Cervantes tilts at slowpokes and Mallory smiles. Chill out. I haven't even reached the Renaissance, and you keep writing stories, novels, epic poems, essays. Why can't you just quit? Let me catch up. Stranded on this long road of type, the Via Literata, you keep paving up ahead of me. Little towns, great cities of ink. I'm still reading in the old world, stalled on Chaucer and Anonymous. Tiny side roads, visiting each town no bigger than a book. Single sentences like paths that tie them all together. Give me a break. I'm out here lost among fields, as many words as grass, and I must catch the whisper in each leaf. Make my way again to where the boulevard of words curves forward, widens out. I must rev my mind up even as it dies, even as it sparks and shudders to a halt far from Shakespeare, takes a wagon back to Beowulf and sets